Hi, I'm Terah. Thank you for joining me. On my channel, I do a lot of DIY tutorials, mostly Cricut projects of all arrays, whether it's heat transfer vinyl, paper crafting, even sublimation, infusible ink projects, all kinds of things. And I like to hit on things like party planning, gift giving, and home decor projects, just all of those things and more. So if you're interested in that, make sure you hit subscribe, and if at any point during this video you find benefit, make sure you hit the like button. So let's get into this. Today I'm going to be going over several Cricut must-dos. And I just want to say that there's a lot of information out there and a lot of misinformation. And overall, craft educators have good intentions. But sometimes we can share things that maybe can be our opinion rather than fact. And so I want to really try to focus on a fact, but it's also going to include my experience, which is possibly different from another craft educator's experience. I think it's really important to just keep humble and know that learning and DIYing, no matter how many years experience that we might have, is always an ever ongoing learning process. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk to you about wax paper, butcher paper, and parchment paper with using sublimation ink or infusible ink, and which one should we use and which one we shouldn't, and my experience as to the why on that. Okay, so for example, this is wax paper. Wax paper has completely covered on both sides this waxy film. You can feel and tell on the wax paper that this is not just one-sided. On both sides you have this like wax coating. And what's the problem with using wax paper is when you have sublimation, you want it to soak in or absorb any of the sublimation that could seep through and come out. You want that material that's around it to protect your heat plate, whatever that may be. In this example right here, I've got my mug press, and I've got my hat press, and my easy press mini. You don't want that ink to seep up onto the surface of your heat press, whatever heat press that may be. And with the wax paper, that's not an absorbent material. So wax paper, out. That's a no-go. Okay, next up, parchment paper. Parchment paper, the particular one that I have, is actually Reynolds Kitchen parchment paper. And when I feel the parchment paper, it feels like there's a little bit of a coating on one side, which if you do research, there's a silicone coating that parchment paper, which sets it apart from wax paper, is supposed to have a coating of. But then on the other side, it doesn't feel like there's much of anything. So in my thinking is that this side that you don't really feel as much of a coating, you're going to want that side to be against your surface. So first you would put your sublimation image onto the item that you're sublimating to. Then you would put the side that seems like it would be more absorbent, that doesn't have a coating, against that side. And then the other side is, if it's like it should be with parchment paper, it should have a little bit of a silicone coating on it. That's going to be heat resistant. And that's the part that's going to be touching up against your heat plate. So the layers would go, this would go, then this would go on this, and then this would wrap around. So parchment paper to me is an alternative and is an option for sure. I would not rule out parchment paper as an option when you're doing sublimation. Definitely keep that. Wax paper, a hard and fast no, because of the coating on each side and the fact that it's not going to have any absorption. Now this is actual Cricut brand butcher paper. And I'm going to show you, and I don't know, and I hope that you can tell from the lighting, that this is shiny on this side. So this actually has a coating on it. This is not going to be absorbent or as absorbent of a material. The other side, and I'm holding it in lighting here so you can see there's not a reflective quality to it. This side is going to be your absorbent side. So with your butcher paper, that's actually Cricut brand butcher paper, and you always hear use butcher paper, use butcher paper. This is directly purchased from Cricut. I just don't have the Cricut box here, but the only place I have purchased butcher paper is from Cricut thus far. So this is Cricut brand. What you would want to do with this Cricut brand butcher paper, same thing with how I showed you the parchment paper, where you see this coated side, you're going to want that to be away from you, away from your projects. You're going to want that to be touching the heat plate. The part that is more dull, you're going to want that facing your image, because this is going to be the more absorbent side, so that when you have this sublimation image, and if it were to seep through on this back side, it's going to absorb into this material and then have the protection to not soak into your heat plate, whichever heat plate that may be, or heat press plate as well. Like if you have a handheld, I have my heat presses on the other side of the room there, but I have a HT Vermont auto heat press and a handheld Cricut heat press. Now, the other thing is, the other option are Teflon sheets. Now, the reason why you do not want to use a Teflon sheet when you're doing sublimation is because this could absorb. So if you did it like this and you put that, you taped that on with heat resistant tape to your project, and then you put the Teflon around it, that this is potentially going to seep out. That's the whole purpose of using the butcher paper or parchment paper. And it's going to seep right into your Teflon. And then when you do iron-on projects or any other heat-resistant projects or heat applicated projects, whatever sublimation that you ink that could be on this from one project or 20 different projects could potentially seep onto your mug, your t-shirts, your coasters, whatever surface you happen to be sublimating or using infusible ink on. I'm using a sublimation print in this, but infusible ink for Cricut also. Same thing, same idea, same process, same type of ink, process where it goes from this and infuses into the blank that you're using, rather than heat transfer vinyl that's just going to be on the surface level. Okay, next up, while we are over here talking about all this heat resistant stuff, I want to talk about heat resistant tape. So heat resistant tape, there are all different kinds. This is regular Cricut brand heat resistant tape. This is the heat resistant tape that came along with something that I purchased. I have not used it yet, so I can't say whether it's good or bad or indifferent. And then we also have the strong heat resistant tape. The strong heat resistant tape you're going to want to use for projects that are with like a heat press or a curved surface like that, like a hat, so that you are really adhering that image to your blank and it's not going to easily pop off. And I am happy with Cricut brand. I believe if it isn't broke, don't try to fix it. And Cricut brand seems to work just fine for me. I have done some research in, maybe trying something else. And I've seen some comments where people are having issues with other heat resistant tape leaving a residue. And I have not had that with Cricut brand, so I'm going to stick with Cricut brand. heat resistant tape. Now what the difference between regular tape and heat resistant tape is, and I'm sure, you know, if you're not a beginner, this will be a no-brainer. And maybe even if you are a newbie, this is a no-brainer. This tape is specially made to resist heat up to a certain degrees of Fahrenheit and Celsius degrees. It will not melt in a mug press or a heat press, even on the high setting. So this will help, like in my case with this particular print that I made of a sublimation design, to get this to stay on here and to adhere evenly. I would want to tape it on all four sides and make sure that it's flush to my sublimation blank with this heat resistant tape. And I highly suggest to use Cricut brand because that is what works for me. Okay, so hopefully going over those different papers of wax paper, parchment paper, and butcher paper were helpful to you. That's my personal experience and those are my personal suggestions. Obviously, sometimes people have different experiences. And I do want to point out and say that all of this can also be dependent on our location. Temperature, when you're at different elevations, can affect, like the temperature of a heat press can be affected by elevation of where you are. And like, for example, if you're higher up in the mountains or if you're in a lower lying flat planed area, it actually can affect how all of our machines and equipment and all the supplies work as well. So one of the things that has kind of bothered me a little bit is a lot of negative talk about Cricut materials in general, because I think that it's possible we all might have a different experience depending on the weather. Let's say somebody that lives in Miami all year round, some of the materials from Cricut might not work the same for them as they would for somebody like myself that's up in the north in Michigan. So those things have to be taken into consideration. So what one thing may work for one Cricut crafter or DIY educator, they might not work for another. So that also has to be taken into consideration, because I've seen recently people saying, hey, don't buy, Cricut vinyl. But in my personal experience, my favorite is Cricut's True Brushed. I absolutely love it. It's great for applying on cups and mugs and all those things that require washing, and I think it looks just like really nice. It makes it look a step up and just very professional, and I love True Brushed. However, I have some smart black vinyl, adhesive vinyl, and I love the stuff because it weeds so great. However, so I have some black smart on the regular size roll, like the big 12-inch. However, I have also had smart adhesive vinyl that doesn't weed all that great. So different batches, different colors, they're not all one and the same. I love my black smart vinyl. It weeds great. But then I have a sampler pack of some colors, smaller Joy ones, and it doesn't weed all that great. So, sometimes it just happens to be a different batch of material, but I'm not paid, as the filming of this in 2023, by any company for my opinions and thoughts on the heat transfer vinyl. I have been gifted different heat transfer vinyls over time, but by no means was I coerced or encouraged to say anything positive or negative, just whatever my true opinion is. So if you want honesty and you want truth, then Terah is the craft educator that you want. The one that I don't want to be is like a craft expert, okay? Because I will never stop learning. I'm always going to be just like you, learning new things, learning new processes, some things that may be taught. You might have to evolve and grow over time and be flexible. So another little tip that I want to share is the wet method. Now I've seen a lot of people do like a soap mixture and water, but for me, just using rubbing alcohol works just fine when you're applying adhesive vinyl onto a glass surface or a mug surface or a rounded surface. Even if it's on like a little sign, like a dry erase board type of texture sign, you're going to want to clean it off with rubbing alcohol to begin with. So you're just going to do a little spritz of the rubbing alcohol, and then you're going to wipe it off clean. And I do have this method in videos. I've got a couple videos where I do the wet method with projects. One specific one that will show it without multitude of projects, just one project, is my monogram mug project. It looks like a little stemless wine glass. It's a lavender. So if you want to go look for that project in my adhesive vinyl projects section or playlist, that will show you in real time how to do the wet method. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to spritz and spray with the rubbing alcohol and then leave it on there and not wipe it off, and then you're going to place your adhesive vinyl project on there. And because you have that water liquid barrier, you're going to be able to move it around and adjust if needed. You'll even be able to peel it back off if needed. Without that moisture barrier, once you set your adhesive vinyl down, it's going to stay and stick where it's at. So that is the benefit from using the wet method, which is basically putting some rubbing alcohol on the surface and then adding to it. Now, like I said, there are different mixtures that add dish soap to water, and I don't know the parts or components, but I have been extremely successful just using a spritz of rubbing alcohol. That is one of my tips that I think is really important for adhering adhesive vinyl onto shiny or smooth surfaces that require some cleaning. Okay, next I want to touch on one of my top Cricut do's, and I don't see it enough, and that is the use of this tool right here. This is a brayer. Now this is a Cricut brand, but there are lots of different types of brayers that you can purchase on Amazon or other places, which actually I can link to this one, and you can purchase it from Amazon, the Cricut brand one as well. I love it. It's my favorite. I've had it for a very long time. My one suggestion that I feel like a lot of us don't talk about is that we need to clean these in between projects sometimes, especially if you're using it to adhere sublimation or infusible ink and you're running. When we do infusible ink, it's actually going to be the ink side up, so we're going to be rolling this right on top of infusible ink. And it is possible that a little bit of that residue could get on our brayer tool. And so my suggestion is, once again, keep this rubbing alcohol handy in your craft room, or some people use baby wipes, which I don't currently have, but at the very least, take some rubbing alcohol and a little cloth. I got these little cloth squares that came in my infusible ink packs, and then just make sure that you spritz and then wipe off your brayer after you've done sublimation or infusible ink projects, anything that could leave a residue on your brayer. But again, I feel like this is an underused product that I highly suggest using. I use it a lot just to adhere my material to my mat, and it's just super helpful when you don't want to scratch material when you're applying it to a surface also. So let's say I have adhesive vinyl on a sign and I really want to make sure it's adhered down. Rather than using my scraper tool, I may use my brayer, which is just a nice silicone material, and it's going to be soft, it's not going to scratch where if you use a scraper tool, that plastic hard edge could potentially, you know, dig into some of your lettering, or pull it up, or scratch the actual surface of wood or plastic or whatever you are applying your adhesive vinyl project to. So, brayer tool. Pick one up if you don't already have one, and make sure you check in my links in this description too if you want to just head on over to Amazon and pick one up for yourself. The other thing is, not all Cricut machines are created equal. And stay with me, let me explain why. Let me give a couple examples first that are like not Cricut related. If you and 10 of your friends all went and bought a brand new GMC Acadia, and you had the exact same model and everything, all 10 of you are going to walk away, go start driving your vehicle. One of them, right pulling out of the dealership, their back right window might not work. There could be, right from the factory, a default, or a default, is that right? Is that the right word? A flaw, right from the factory, the manufacturer. There could be something that went wrong, a short in the wiring, something didn't get soldered properly. So straight from the gate, you could have 10, 11 different GMC Acadias, exactly the same model and everything, and somebody could pull out of that lot and instantly have a problem. You just don't know. Every single thing, every single machine is not 100% equal, and it's not going to be exactly the same. So sometimes when we give cutting suggestions, or even in Cricut in their design space, let's say you're going to cut and you select craft board because you're cutting craft board, and you use the exact blade they tell you to, and it doesn't work, then leave it in your machine, don't take it out, and hit that Cricut C again so it'll recut. But that's just one example. This machine right here, this is my original Maker. I also have a Maker 3 and a Joy, and my lid quit working. Now, does that mean that your lid is going to quit working? No. So cut settings, you know, everything could be just a little bit different. I mean, some people, their roller wheels might go bad, or they could be defective from right away. You know, the manufacturer, whoever Cricut purchases these little roller wheels, these little rubber wheels in here. Maybe they got the manufacturer used a little bit of a different material that time, and so it's cracking and it's breaking a little bit sooner than a material that they used previously to get the rubber wheel. So that's the thing. When educators of crafting and DIYing try to share their knowledge, we all, I think, well, I can't speak for all, most are well-intentioned and have good intentions and genuinely and sincerely want to help you. And sometimes we make mistakes, and we might say things that aren't accurate and aren't exactly correct. And I just added an extra syllable to exactly, but that's okay. But I am well-intentioned. Everything that I share because I have experienced it, and that's what works for me. But sometimes you might have to use a little bit of a different setting and try a little different setting, or things might go wrong with your Cricut, and it may not happen to other people, and just things happen when you're dealing with manufacturing and machines and things. All machines are not equal. Just like if you were to go buy 10 or 11 different Acadias and drive off the lot with the exact same model, different things could go wrong with each of them, even if they're brand spanking new. Things happen. The other thing I wanted to touch on is that t-shirt placement. So if you see my t-shirt that I have on here right now, I have this design. Let me just stand up so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, I am happy with the placement of where my wording is on this t-shirt. But if you were to like do the 3-finger rule, look, you can see this is not, the image doesn't start 3 fingers down. It doesn't even start 4 fingers down, or my 4 fingers. And that's the other thing is, I have skinny little fingers. So what my fingers are different than somebody else's fingers. So this hard and fast rule of, oh, you have to do 3 fingers down for your image, that is something that I feel is people's opinion. It's a suggestion, but it's not a hard and fast rule. I also have this little t-shirt measure that I really like. It's an all-in-one, and I will link it in the description if you're interested in it. I love it because you don't have to have 5 different t-shirts. You have this little guide that comes with it to tell you how to use it, which I ran through my laminator, so it's going to stay nice and durable for me for years to come. And it's just a guide. It's not a hard and fast rule. You can use it just to help line up your lettering or your design, and then you can put it and place it wherever you choose. If you want it up higher, if you want it down lower, it's all up to you. And the suggestions that are made by craft educators are meant to be beneficial, but sometimes you can get information from craft educators that come across where they're maybe not as knowledgeable, and I hope that that doesn't happen to you. You'll have to develop your own trust with me over time. I will share my honest opinion about products, materials, blanks, what have you, and I'm going to tell you the truth. And if at some point those things change or my opinions change, I will share also. Like if I'm using something and it seems to really be working and then it's not working so well, I'm going to share that with you. So I hope that today has been beneficial to you. I hope that you found benefit. And if you have at any point, make sure that you give this a like. I always appreciate that. It helps kind of spread the videos out through the YouTube community of all of us crafters and creators. And until next time, go check out another one of my videos.